just want to say we have been waiting on you for 2 years. We have been waiting on you to come to camp for 2 long years. And y'all are beautiful. You are so beautiful. And you smell good, but it's just Monday. It's just Monday. So our theme all summer is reborn. In a lot of ways, it feels like our world is being reborn right now. I know a lot of you spent a lot of time waiting this past 18 months. You waited on your teachers to log on to a class through Zoom or some other online portal. You waited for the CDC to tell us information about COVID. You waited on your takeout order because you couldn't go into a restaurant to eat. How many of you absolutely hate to wait? Can I see your hands if you do not enjoy it at all? I don't enjoy it either. And sometimes I feel like when God is trying to teach me a lesson on patience, He will send me up I-85. And I don't know where you live, if it's I-10 or I-40 or I-95 or I-77 or whatever it might be. But what we're going to start off our week with is a story from the Gospel of John. If you brought a Bible, you can turn to John 11. If you don't have a Bible with you, you can look up on the screens because we're going to be in John chapter 11. And the first night's message is simply titled, Reborn Literally. Reborn literally. Now raise your hand if you were ever born in your life. Can I see your hands if you were ever born in your life? If you don't raise your hand, I'm going to assume you are a cyborg and we're going to have you arrested. I want to talk about what it means to be reborn literally. And the first point I want to make, because I want to dive into this, we all hate to wait. Can I hear a big amen? We hate to wait. Oh my goodness, we do not enjoy waiting at all. How many of you are rule breakers by nature, and when you are forced to wait, you begin to scheme a way to break in line or beat the system? Can I see the hands of the rule breakers? My hand is up with you because I'm a rule breaker. How many of you are rule followers by nature, and you hate to wait, but you're going to do it because those are the rules? Can I see your hands? People like me love to dominate people like you when we have to wait because we're looking for a way to cheat. How many of you have ever had to wait in line at the Department of Motor Vehicles? Let's not be too rough on the DMV employees. They have a very, very hard job. Let me tell you, so my son Jacob and I were this weekend traveling to Washington, D.C., and on Saturdays, so I'm always trying to figure out a way to save time because I hate to wait so much. So I'm looking online at which airline tickets we needed to purchase to go to Washington, D.C., because we were going to preach, and we did preach yesterday 3 times at a church just south of D.C., 8 a.m., 9:30, and 11:15, 3 times in a row, back to back to back. So I'm looking at the tickets online, and I'm thinking I can fly Delta, and this is the itinerary, but if I fly American Airlines, I will save 2 hours, and instead of having to leave my house at 10:30 in the morning on Saturday, I don't have to leave until 12:30, and I get 2 extra hours. I get 2 hours to do what I want to do. I can drink another cup of coffee because I'm a Christian. I can play with our little dog Theo, who weighs like 13 pounds, and he's a toy poodle, and I act like I can't stand him, but I really love him because he's so cuddly and so cute, and he just got a haircut, and he looks like a rat. I'm thinking of all the things I can do with that 2 extra hours. And then Jacob and I go to Greenville, Spartanburg, and we're waiting on our flight to take off, and they come on the intercom and tell us there is a mechanical issue. Our flight is delayed. We're going to have to wait. And when I hear the word wait, it's always like slow motion pain. You're going to have to wait. And I feel my anxiety begin to rise. And I feel the anger begin to build. And then I start thinking of ways that I won't have to wait. Then they come back on the intercom and tell us the mechanical issue is a little more serious. You may have to wait a little bit longer. Then they tell us it's an air conditioning issue. The airplane is extremely hot. Then they tell us it's a seal on the air conditioning issue. You're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Then the lady comes on the speaker and she tells all of us waiting at gate A2 or B3 or wherever we were that they don't have that particular seal at the Greenville-Spartanburg airport. They're going to have to try to find it at another airport. And so Jacob and I leave the Greenville-Spartanburg airport and we drive to Charlotte to try to catch our flight. And then when we try to catch our flight, so our flight connected in Charlotte and was boarding at 5:55 p.m. We made it there. We got to the gate, parked my truck, run through the airport. This happened 2 days ago. Walk up to the gate. I've got my boarding passes. The woman scans my boarding passes and said, "I'm sorry, sir. We gave away your seats. You'll have to wait on the 8:30 p.m. flight." We made it to D.C. We had a late night. But I do believe that maybe one of the reasons the Lord allowed me and my son Jacob to experience that disruption in our plans and that disappointment of our expectations was to remind me of what I'm about to preach to you tonight, because I'm going to talk to you about how much we hate to wait, but what God might be up to while we're waiting. Because we've all come out of a season where we've had to wait. You know, last summer, we did hometowns. We did a free summer camp for as many people that wanted to participate. In 25 years of summer camp, last summer was going to be by far our biggest summer. We were trending to break 6,000 campers on our quarter-century anniversary, and then we had to shut down camp. We lost almost our entire budget last year. We lost, when you add up mission trips that were canceled, speaking events that were canceled, all of our summer camps that were canceled, winter conference that was canceled, our nonprofit ministry lost close to $2 million last year. We had to wait. Didn't like it. Didn't enjoy it. I was angry about it. I was disappointed. There were days I was upset at God, and I told him. But what I learned through that process is that while you're waiting on things to happen, you don't have to waste the waiting if you believe that our God is a God who really does bring rebirth. This is what happens in John chapter 11. Let me read it to you. You can look on in your scriptures if you want to, beginning in verse 1. John chapter 11, verse 1 and following. This is a story of a man named Lazarus, and Lazarus was one of Jesus' very best friends. Jesus loved everybody, but just like you, he had some best friends. And Lazarus had two sisters, Mary and Martha. They lived in a town called Bethany. I've been to Bethany. I've been there multiple times. I've actually been to the place where they believe that this story took place. Let me read the story to you from John chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. Now a man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. Don't miss that. Lazarus is only sick at this point of the story. So she and her sister sent a message to the Lord. Lord, the one that you love is sick. He's not dead, he's sick. She also is reminding Jesus, hey, Lazarus is your friend. You love him. He's sick. But look what Jesus did in verse 4. When Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, watch this, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after that, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again. Don't miss that. Jesus gets word that Lazarus is sick. It was a pretty quick trip for him to get to Lazarus and heal him. But Jesus waited 2 days. Let that sink in for a minute. The Bible is filled with stories of real people who had real situations, just like the real situations that you live in every day, where you're praying for God to do something and God hasn't done it yet. You're praying for God to redeem and restore your parents' marriage, but they're still filing for divorce, and it looks like God doesn't hear your prayer. Your grandmother got cancer. Y'all prayed for God to heal your grandmother, and your grandmother died. Let's get honest and let's get real right off the bat here at night one. We don't always understand what's going on. And in this story, let's embrace it. Let's just tell it like it is. This, by the way, this is one of the reasons why I know that the Bible is not made up. This is one of the ways I know the Bible is true. Because if people had orchestrated the Bible and made up Jesus like a fictitious character or a superhero, they would have never put stories like this in the Bible. They would have never told about how Peter denied Jesus. They would never talk about how Judas betrayed Jesus. They would never talk about how King David basically raped a woman, got her pregnant, and then killed her husband to cover up the pregnancy. They wouldn't tell all of the dirty, ugly portions of human beings who were supposed to be our spiritual heroes. Jesus disappoints Mary and Martha. He waits 2 days while Lazarus lays in Bethany and gets worse. I want to let the tension sink in with you. I'm not going to skip over that right now. I want you to feel that. I want you to know that if you're alive, you're going to have to wait and you're going to hate it. What was Jesus doing? We don't always see it. I lost my mom and dad a little over a year apart. I preached my dad's funeral on Father's Day in 2012. I lost 10 family members in 12 years and preached all 10 of their funerals. Don't you think I prayed to God a lot for some healing and for some miracles? There's a mystery that surrounds why God does what God does, and the timing around it. I won't even try to explain all that. I just want to point out to you that Mary and Martha had a sick brother, and they knew that Jesus could do something, so they expected Jesus to come and heal him. But Jesus waited. Point number 2, while we're waiting, God is working. We don't always see it. We don't always understand it. But while we are waiting, God is working. So in verse 7, Jesus says, after 2 days, y'all ready to go? Let's go. I'm ready to go back to Bethany. Judea is the region, Bethany is the city. Let's go. And we skip ahead now to verse 14 and 15. So Jesus then told them plainly, his disciples, Lazarus has died. What? Jesus let him die. Look what he says after that. I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe. But let's go to him. Okay, let me pause again. Feel the tension in those words. Jesus could have healed Lazarus, but he waited 2 days, and while he waited, Lazarus died. But while we're waiting, God is working. While the sisters were waiting on Jesus to come, Jesus evidently had some kind of plan. He's just said this will not end in death, and now Lazarus is dead. Look up here. He just said, this will not end in death, and now Lazarus has died. Is Jesus a liar? Don't answer. Is Jesus wrong? Did Jesus make a mistake? Did Jesus make a promise that he could not keep? He said this will not end in death, but it looks like it's ended because death is final. So Jesus lets Lazarus die, but he says, I'm glad for your sake that I was not there, but so that you may believe. Let's go to him. Now, skip to verse 20. As soon, verse 17. I'm sorry, verse 20. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Because, by the way, time out, just a footnote here, all the Jews believed in a resurrection. The Hebrews believed that there was a resurrection from the dead. She thought Jesus was talking about one day. She didn't realize Jesus was talking about 2 days. I know that my brother will rise again in the resurrection. Jesus said to her, verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? This is a question Jesus asks frequently in the Gospels, but it is the theme of John's Gospel. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. So can you imagine the frustration, the confusion, how upset these sisters are? Jesus shows up late. They had to wait. He gets there late. The funeral has already taken place. Lazarus is buried in the tomb, a cave in the side of a rock. There's a stone across the opening. He's been dead now for a while. While we're waiting, God is working. Do you really believe that? I don't know what you're waiting on right now in your life, but some of y'all, you're waiting. Some of you are waiting for healing, and I don't just mean physical healing. Some of you, if statistics are true, stats tell us, and these are scientific stats, that 1 out of 3 girls and 1 out of 5 now, 5.5 actually, the way it works mathematically, 1 out of 5.5 to 6 young men will be sexually abused before they reach middle age. 1 out of 3 females, 1 out of 6 guys. Some of you are waiting on healing from abuse. Some of you are waiting on healing from depression. Some of you are not depressed, but you think you're depressed because all you ever do is, and this is not me, being critical, but maybe you have believed that you're depressed and you're really just having a bad day or you're having a bad year, but you think you're depressed because all of your friends talk about being depressed and our culture talks about being depressed, and everybody who's ever sad or gets disappointed just self-diagnoses himself as depressed, and you're waiting for God to heal you of that. And I've been depressed. Depression's a real thing, and it hurts, and it's difficult to overcome. Maybe some of you are waiting for God to heal you from anxiety, or you're praying for God to deliver you from insecurity, and you need God to help you, and you're praying, and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you're praying. And maybe some of you are waiting, and you're not praying at all because you've prayed a few times, and you didn't get what you asked for, and you stopped praying. Mary and Martha can relate to you. They didn't just pray to Jesus like we do. They actually talked to Jesus in the flesh. And he waited. So I want to set up the tension in the story. I don't want to just skip over it to the good part. I want you to feel this. I want you to feel how desperately these sisters needed Jesus. I want you to know how desperately Lazarus needed Jesus. And I want you to experience how deeply you need Jesus. You need him too. That's what this whole week of camp is about. That's what the theme of reborn is all about. That we can be reborn literally, not just figuratively, but actual, literal rebirth is possible, but only through Jesus. Now, let me just ask you a question before we get to the really good part here. What if all of this that we're reading about, what if all of this that's going on is somehow a setup for what Jesus has in mind to do? And I want to put that idea in your head. What if Romans 8 is really true and all things do work together for the good of those who love God and are called for His purposes? What if God sees things that you don't see? What if God knows things that you don't know? What if God understands things that are nonsense to you? What if God has total authority to look back in the past and forward into the future? And what if nothing ever surprises God? And what if your crisis and my really bad year doesn't worry God in the least? What if God all along has been watching over you, listening to you, caring about you, superimposing the details of your world, superintending the little things that you think are random? And what if God, in His wisdom and sovereignty, has a setup for you and you just haven't seen it yet? The hair on my arms literally right now is standing on end because in my life I have seen this truth literally hundreds of times. That I'm panicking and freaking out and I don't understand what God's doing. And I'm telling God I'm upset and I'm writing in my journal, where is God? And I'm calling friends and I'm telling my wife, I don't know what God's up to. And every single time God comes through. And even when it looks like He doesn't come through according to me, He still comes through. When my dad died, I was praying for a long time God would heal my dad. But my dad told me on his deathbed, do not pray for God to heal me and let me live in this body anymore. Jesus wants me in heaven. I'm ready to go. You keep preaching the gospel. We've got eternity together, son. You've got a job to do in the meantime. Wasn't what I wanted, but it was God's mysterious, sovereign will. What if this whole story in John 11 is Jesus setting up something that would blow everybody's mind? Because here's what this passage proves. A miracle first requires a mess. Everybody wants to see the miracle, but we don't want to go through the mess to get us there. But if you never have a mess in your life, you don't get the miracle on the other end of it. A miracle first requires a mess. And we're about to see the mess that Jesus steps into because He's in Bethany and there's an emotional mess, there's a family mess, and there's a physical mess that includes a dead, rotting human body. Look at verse 32. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw Him, she fell at His feet. And she told Him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her crying and the Jews who had come with her crying, He was deeply moved in His spirit and He was troubled. Where have you put him? Jesus asked. Lord, they told Him, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how He loved him? But some of them said, couldn't the one who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying? And that's a fair question. Jesus could have kept Lazarus dying, but these critics point out something very important. Don't miss this. Everybody in Bethany, everybody in Jerusalem, everybody in Judea, they already knew that Jesus could heal sick people. They'd seen Him do it. You know what they had never seen? Someone raised from the dead. He'd healed a blind man, but He'd never raised a dead man. Verse 38, then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. "Remove the stone," Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, "Lord, there is already a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." And then Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So a dead man's body that has not been embalmed, because that didn't exist in Israel. A dead man's body that's not in a casket like the kind that we put our dead relatives in when they die. A dead man's body who has been wrapped in cloth and strips of linen with some spices and some oil poured over the top of it, has now been in a tomb for 4 days in an arid country in the Middle East, in Judea, which is in the southern part of Israel, where it's hot, and his body has now begun to decay to the point that the cells have begun to break down, the flesh has begun to rot, and there was such a bad odor that the Jews would not, even according to ceremony, Jews couldn't touch a dead body, and if you prepared a dead body for burial, you were unclean for 30 days. You had to go through a 30-day mourning period. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. His body is rotting. The smell is disgusting. This is a mess. This is a mess. And Jesus let him die, and now Jesus is there, and Jesus wants to go pay him a visit. A miracle first requires a mess, and Jesus is stepping into one. I just want to point this out. There's a lot of mess right there in Bethany. But your personal mess that you brought with you to camp, that's where Jesus does his best miracles. Your brokenness is where Jesus does his best work. And I want to own this. I want to say this. Everybody in this room, there's almost 900 of us counting staff. Everybody in this room is broken. Everybody in this room is a sinner. Every one of you, including me, deserves to be punished for our sin. Not one of us is perfect. And I want to tell you, I'm a pastor, I'm a preacher, I'm an evangelist, and I sin every day. I am broken. I am not perfect. I've got my own past. I've got my own baggage. I've got my own issues. I'm just like you. So I want you to know every one of us has a mess that we brought with us to camp. Addictions, shame, insecurities. Some of you came to camp hoping and praying that your mom and dad don't check your internet history, or that they don't figure out some of the links you've been clicking on or some of the websites you've been visiting. Some of you came to camp knowing that you've been way too physical with your boyfriend or your girlfriend back home. And you're either going to miss them and you're really sad about it, or you know that you need to get some things right because you're convicted of that sin. Some of you have been looking forward to camp because this is the best week of your life because your home is filled with so much strife, so much pain. I just want to connect you with this story and show you that Jesus cares about you. Jesus cried with Mary and Martha because they lost their brother. Jesus wept with these two sisters. Jesus cares about your pain. Jesus cares about your hurt. Jesus cares about your brokenness. But your mess is where he does his best miracle. And there has to be a mess if there's going to be a miracle at all. I told you the title of this message is Reborn. Literally, I saw a story like this happen a few years ago. And I want to show you before we come back to the scripture and see the end of this story, I want you to know that this is not just a history lesson or a story from 2,000 years ago. Jesus is still calling people back to life today. Being reborn is not something that happened way back then. It's something that's still happening right now. I saw it with my own two eyes. I'd like for you to watch it.
My mom called me and tried to be as calm as she could be, and she said, I don't want you to get upset. Your dad's had a massive heart attack. We're on our way to the hospital. He died 3 times between work and the Greenville hospital while he was in the ambulance. He had to be resuscitated. We weren't sure if he was going to make it or not. Growing up, my dad was in retail and was a store manager, so he was working a lot. We just didn't really get to spend the kind of time together that we probably should have and wanted to. You know, our relationship, especially as I got older, was probably strained, to say the least. When I first got to the hospital, they had to put him on life support. They had to intubate him. He was not, breathing on his own. There wasn't a whole lot of positivity coming out. It was, the situation was pretty dire. After being up there for a little over a week, they told us that that they weren't measuring any type of brain activity. That essentially he was, for all points and purposes, he was brain dead. They asked us at that time what his wishes were, and they asked my mom, did she know, and they had a conversation. And my dad didn't want to be kept alive on life support. The thought of not ever being able to, have my dad look at me and recognize me or say my name again. At the end of it all, I just couldn't get peace about disconnecting the life support. Shortly after that, his organs started to fail. And, they told us that his kidneys were shutting down and that basically it was the beginning of his body just failing. Completely distraught at that time, I left the room and went out into the waiting room. I walked past someone who was sitting in the waiting room, and I realized it was Clayton.
I was in the hospital in Greenville with my dad. He had just had a massive heart attack. As a result of that, had triple bypass surgery. So I'd been in the hospital with him for 10 or 11 days. I was afraid. I was discouraged. Thought my dad was gonna die. And a random guy walks into the waiting room. And honestly, I thought to myself, the last thing I want to do right now is talk to somebody, especially at a hospital, because I bet there's some kind of crisis going on.
Went up to Clayton and I said, I'm up here with my dad, and I know you don't know me, but I really would like to share with you what's going on and ask you to pray for my dad.
We called out to God, and I really don't remember what we prayed for except that we asked God for a miracle. He walked out, I sat back down on the couch, watched the rest of the sermon, fell asleep. And to be honest with you, I really didn't give it a second thought after he walked out of the room.
After he prayed, I just felt a peace come over me. I went back to Dad's room, and as I was coming down the hallway, the main nurse that was attending him that night came out of the room, and she had a look on her face that I thought the worst had happened. I thought, Dad had died, but then when I got to her, she started to smile, and she's like, "You won't believe this. Your dad's kidneys are functioning." It was right then that, I knew that God had done something supernatural.
Hey, Dad. I love you. I love you, Dad.
Over a period of the next 6 weeks, they were able to take the trach out. He was able to start breathing on his own, and he got to the point where he was actually able to talk again. He made a full recovery mentally. He was able to go home. We were able to take him home. Can you make this again? I was like, yeah. So then the next day, they come home, they're all starving. You think they'd never eat alive. The time that I got to spend with Clayton that night in the waiting room, it was a turning point in my dad's recovery. And I'd always wanted to talk to Clayton about it and just share with him what God had done. It always seemed like if there was an opportunity at a church where he was close by, there would be a lot of people around. And, I didn't have an opportunity to get him, just the two of us, so I could talk with him about it. And one day we were both at a local sporting goods store.
And a random guy walks up behind me in line, and he goes, "Clayton, hey, you don't remember me, do you?"
It was 8 years ago. I didn't expect him to remember it, but surprisingly he did.
I said, "Man, I remember the prayer. I remember you and I in the waiting room. Really sorry about what happened." And his face completely changed. He said, "Oh, Clayton, you don't know what happened, do you?"
Oh, he was just amazed. He was blown away. I was really glad to get that opportunity to share what had happened with him, because I felt like he needed to know that God had used him to be a big part of our family story.
So when I find out that a man is actually alive that I thought had been dead for 8 years, I had a lot of feelings going through my heart. I was thankful, mostly. I was amazed. I was also a little convicted that I didn't actually believe that God would do a miracle, even though Shannon and I had prayed for one 8 years earlier. But honestly, I just want to meet him.
Clayton.
What's up?
Hey, man.
Hey.
This is my dad.
How you
It's
doing?
good to meet you, sir.
Hug your neck.
Yes, sir.
It's so good.
I want to hug yours, too.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Man, let's sit down a minute. So you're how old? 71?
71. 71.
Almost didn't make it to 71, did you?
Almost went out much earlier, back in 2009, yes.
And I can't, honestly, I was so late at night, I don't remember if you asked me to pray, or if I asked you to pray, or if we both just started praying.
Yeah, you said, you told me that you said, "I want to pray for your dad right now. I'm going to pray with you right now." So, yeah.
Yeah.
And thank goodness you did, because I think God heard your prayer.
And I had no idea. I just assumed that you had passed away.
Yeah.
And then Shannon told me the story.
Yes. I'm just glad to be here.
I bet you are. I honestly can't believe I'm sitting here talking to you.
Yes, sir. I see Shannon, and it's hard for me to believe that I'm still able to be in his life. It means
That's right. We got a second chance.
It's never too late.
never too late.
Never too late. And I can't believe it. It's so good to, I still can't believe I'm sitting here talking to you.
It was just a miracle. God decided to answer a prayer and to bless our family with a miracle. Something that none of the medical personnel that were tending to Dad or anybody else that was there and present for that situation could attribute to science. Nobody had an explanation for it. It was all God.
And I want you to know that God's power is unlimited. If we believe in him, the greatest miracle is being reborn spiritually. Shannon's dad was literally raised to life moments before they were going to pull the plug and let him die naturally. And that's a true story that happened just a few years ago. But right here tonight, Some of you are going to be reborn spiritually. You're going to have your sins forgiven. You're going to have your life changed. You're going to have your future completely transformed. But I want to finish the story, and I want to show you exactly what happens to Lazarus. John chapter 11, verses 41 through 44. So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips and with his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unwrap this man and let him go. And a man who had been dead for 4 days hears the voice of Jesus call his name, and he obeys him. I wasn't there that day, but there were eyewitnesses who saw it happen, and they passed it down. And now we get to read about it 2,000 years later. And it occurred to me one day what it would have been like to be there at the tomb with everybody weeping and everybody crying and people kind of mad at Jesus because he hasn't done things the way they expected. And then Jesus makes them roll the stone away. Then Jesus walks up to the entrance of the cave. There is a dead body inside that stinks of death. And Jesus says, Lazarus, come out. What if Jesus had not been specific? I like things that are clear. I like things that are simple. I need people to be specific for me. Jesus did not want to confuse anybody that day, so he specified who he was talking to. Let me just lay it out for you. If Jesus had left out the name Lazarus and had simply said, come out, we would have seen thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dead bodies in tombs and graves and graveyards, in the ocean, in creeks and rivers and lakes, in the mountains and the swamps and the deserts and the wastelands. Everybody who had ever died since the beginning of time would have had to obey the voice of Jesus, because when the maker of life says come out, you obey. Jesus is bigger than death, stronger than the grave. Jesus was only trying to raise one man that day, and that's why he had to say Lazarus. And if you'll listen really closely, some of you can hear him calling your name right now. If you'll listen right now to what's happening in your heart, not with your ears, but if you'll listen with your soul, Jesus is calling your name. Because some of you, while I've been preaching, your heart started beating faster. And every time I've said the word believe in this message, you've wondered, I think I want to believe this. Some of you have already believed. Some of you are already following Jesus. But a lot of you have never truly put your faith in him. Let me show you what's really going on in this story. This was the 7th sign of the Messiah. Don't miss this. John is different than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk about miracles. When Jesus does something like this, it's a miracle. But you know what John calls these kinds of things? A sign. And there are 7 of them. The Jews were waiting on a Messiah, but the Messiah had 7 miracles he would have to perform to prove he was really God in the flesh. Can I list them all for you? They're all found in John's gospel. I'm just going to list them all. The first miracle Jesus performed, he turned water into wine. The second miracle, he healed an official's son. The third miracle, he healed a paralytic who could not walk. The fourth miracle, Jesus fed 5,000 men plus women and children, probably 20,000 people, with one little Hebrew boy's Jewish Lunchable. The fifth miracle, Jesus comes out on the Sea of Galilee in the middle of a storm, and he defies and suspends the laws of gravity, and Jesus walks on water and then calls Peter to come and join him. The sixth miracle, Jesus heals a man who was blind. And the seventh miracle, the last miracle, the final proof that this man was the Son of God, the final proof that the Jews had been waiting for, the seventh sign among the seven signs is when he raised Lazarus from the dead. I told you already, they knew Jesus could heal sick people. What they didn't know is that Jesus could raise dead people. 7 signs in John's gospel. And in the story of Lazarus, the word believe is mentioned. Guess. 7 times. 7 times in John chapter 11, Jesus says, so that you may believe. I didn't go and heal him when he was sick so that you would believe I'm the Messiah, because I've got to complete all 7 signs. I've got to show you a miracle. Didn't I tell you that if you believed in me, you would see the glory of God? I am the resurrection and the life. Do you believe this? 7 signs Jesus completed. 7 times the word believe is mentioned in John chapter 11. Jesus is up to something. He wants you to believe in him. He wants you to put your faith in him. He wants you to put all of your trust in him. He wants you to love him and follow him. He wants your life, because Jesus is not some narcissist in heaven that wants to control you. He is a loving friend that wants to set you free from the burdens that this world wants to put on your shoulders. Jesus is not trying to ruin your life. He's trying to save your life. Jesus isn't trying to reform you and clean you up. He wants you to be reborn. When a baby is born, they're born pure and clean. They're born with a clean slate. Jesus wants to give you a clean slate. And if you'll believe in him, he will. And guys, look, I believe this with all of my heart. So every time I read this story and Jesus asks Mary and Martha, do you believe this? Every single time I read this story, I pause, no matter where I am, and I say out loud, I believe it, Jesus. I still believe it 35 years after I believed it for the first time. I was an 8th grader when I believed it for the first time. 35 years later, right here on this stage at Crossroads, I still believe it. I believe it more now than I believed it then. I believe it now because I'm seeing rebirth happen all the time. I believe it now because 170 people were reborn last week at camp. I believe it now because Shannon Forrest and I prayed in a dark waiting room at Greenville Memorial Hospital years ago for a Hail Mary, and God gave his dad a second chance at life, and his dad was reborn. I believe it because I'm still being reborn every single day. Some of you have already been reborn, but some of you never have, and that's what you need right now. You don't need less time on Instagram. You don't need better habits. You don't need to eat cleaner. All those things are good, but they don't make you reborn. Jesus makes you reborn, and he loves you just like you are, but he loves you too much to let you stay that way. 7 times the word believe is mentioned in this story. You know why? Because Jesus wants you to believe. If you want to be reborn, you simply have to believe. If you want to be reborn, you simply have to believe. Hey guys, what if the story of Lazarus is in the Bible? Not so much for Lazarus. What if Jesus didn't just raise Lazarus from the dead so that Mary and Martha would get their brother back for a few more years? What if the story of Lazarus isn't in the Bible just so that Lazarus got 10, 20, 30 more years at life? What if the story of Lazarus is in the Bible for you so that you would believe? What if this whole entire miracle, this whole entire sign, what if all 7 of the signs Jesus performed, and the final one, the big one, The finale, raising Lazarus from the dead, was so that you could hear this story 2,000 years later and you could be touched in your heart and you could decide, sitting right there in your seat or watching online on Facebook, you could decide, I want to be reborn. I believe. I believe Jesus died on the cross in my place to take away my sins. I believe that Jesus is resurrected from the dead so that I can have new life. I believe he is better than anything else in this world, and I'm going to give him my life. What if everything I just preached to you was so that you would believe? I'm telling you right now, it is. It is. And now it's time for some of you to give your life to Jesus. It's time for some of you to be saved. It's time for some of you to be born again right now. You can be reborn right here, right now. We don't wait till Thursday night at Crossroads to tell people how to be saved. We do it the first night because it's too good to wait. Sometimes you wait because you have to. Sometimes you don't have to wait. We don't have to wait till Thursday night to see people get reborn. We watch people get reborn right now on Monday.